Hi, this is Ajay Anand and welcome to Social Science classes from excelup.com. In this lesson, you will be learning about globalization. You will learn about the meaning of globalization, about history of globalization, then about causes of globalization and impact of globalization. So let us start with the meaning of globalization. The process of integration of markets around the world is called globalization. To understand this, let us take a hypothetical example. All of you must be aware about Google, the internet giant. Google has headquarters in the USA and it has servers located across the globe at many locations. For example, there can be a server in Singapore, there can be a server in Europe, in Latin America, and at many other places. Then Google has offices at several locations. For example, in case of India, there are two offices. There is one office at Gurgaon and another at Bangalore. And barring a few countries, Google has users or consumers from around the world. So the market for Google across the world is really integrated. So this is a very good example of a truly globalized company. Another example can be Ford Motors. The Ford Motors is an American company which makes cars. Ford has many factories around the world, and there is a factory at Chennai in India. The factory at Chennai makes engines and bodies. Then it may be getting maybe headlamps from different location, maybe from other country, seat belts from country A, then tires from country B, pistons from country C, and so on and so forth. And all these components, they are assembled together to make a car at the Chennai plant. Once the car is ready, it is sent to different location wherever the market is or the Ford's network is. So the car which is being produced at Chennai plant can be selling somewhere in South Africa or maybe in Sri Lanka. So this is another example of a truly globalized company. Nike can be a very good example because Nike is also an USA based company, and it procures shoes from East Asian nations like Taiwan and Malaysia, where shoes are manufactured. Then Nike sells its shoes to the consumers around the world. Globalization is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it had been there even during the days of the Indus Valley civilization, because artifacts which had been recovered from the excavation sites of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, they tell that trade relations were there from different parts of the world, especially from the Arabian world. Okay. Then during the medieval phase, there was the Silk Route, the famous Silk Route. It was named because the silk was being traded through this route. Silk came from China and other goods came from other parts of the world to China. So this was an era where globalization was there in certain degrees. In the 19th century, when India was under the colonial rule, India was an exporter of raw materials. So India used to export cotton and indigo, and when cotton reached the factories of Britain, finished goods, they were imported from Britain. So this was the scene till independence. The situation changed after independence and India started making so many things. And till the mid of the 20th century, the situation was more or less similar in other countries also, because most of the countries, they were inward looking and trying to be self-sufficient in their manufacturing capacity. Things started to change in later half of the 20th century when different countries, they started to explore the benefits of liberalization. And this was the period when MNCs, that is multinational corporations, they started spreading their wings across different markets. So in a nutshell, this is the history of globalization. What are the causes of globalization? There are many causes. There is a cause, capital mobility. The investors, they always keep on looking for opportunities where to they can invest capital to earn more profit, maximum profit. So this ensures that capital moves from place A to place B. Whenever an investor senses an opportunity that place B is going to give more profit in future compared to whatever place A is giving. So this resulted in globalization. Then there was labor mobility. People, they were willing to move from their original place, from their hometown or home state or even home countries to different places in search of better opportunities of livelihood. And that is how the globalization, the process of globalization was rolled on. Then the development of technology, it also played important role in globalization. So there can be many examples. I have taken two examples here. One example is of container. A container is a huge metallic box in which luggage is transported. So a container full of luggage can be easily loaded onto a ship. It can be offloaded from a ship, then it can be transferred to a truck or to a train or even to an aircraft without disturbing whatever luggage is there inside the container. So container made the life easier. It reduced the cost of handling the goods at ports. It also reduced the time for handling the goods at ports. So thus container facilitated smoother flow of goods, and it helped in improving the trade. Another example is of developments in information technology. So around 30 years ago, the landline telephone was the only means of telecommunication, that is communication to long distances. Then came the mobile phone, that happened around 20 years back at the dawn of the 21st century. And then many improvements happened in the field of internet. And because of improvements in internet and mobile telephony, now telecommunication, it has become easier. Now you can even send a full movie without spending a single penny. Okay. So now transmission of text, images, videos, and even money, it can happen within a second. You can send money from India to America within a flash. So that is how the technology helped in increasing the degree of globalization. Then MNCs, the multinational corporation, they also help, because the role of MNC or for any organization, the whole sole purpose is to earn maximum profit. And there can be two ways of maximizing profit. One is by increasing the profit margin, which is not always possible because of competition. So another way is to reduce costs. So cost reduction can be done by spreading the different parts of operation or manufacturing processes to different locations. Say for example, let us take example once again of the Ford car. So the Ford prefers to manufacture cars in India or in China because the cost of labor is less in India. India has a huge pool of qualified engineering graduates and who can work at a less wages compared to whatever the wages are there in the USA. So by opting to manufacture its cars in India, the Ford Motors company, it can reduce its cost. So in order to reduce the cost, the MNCs, they started operating different processes to different locations of the globe, and that is how globalization spread. Then came the role of liberalization. Right from the 1980s, the WTO, and before that it was GATT, that was General Agreement on Trade and Taxes, Tariffs. So it started advocating for liberalization, for reducing the trade barriers. Trade barrier is a thing, it's an artificial thing. Human beings, we create certain laws to erect trade barriers. So for example, the government, it can hike custom duty if it wants to prevent or it wants to minimize the import of certain items in the country. So one good example can be that of Harley Davidson motorcycle in India. Recently, the government of India, it has increased the customs duty on Harley Davidson motorcycle so that lesser number of motorcycles, they can be imported, because after hike of custom duty, the cost of the end price of the motorcycle, it will be much higher. Okay, so these are trade barriers. So liberalization, it ensured that trade barriers, they were reduced in most of the countries. Then transport sector, it also improved. Airfares, it went down. Cost of transporting goods through air transport, it went down. Then improved and better cargo ships were designed to facilitate smoother movement of goods, and all of these factors, they helped in increasing the degree of globalization around the world. Now, what are the impacts of globalization? There can be positive impacts, there can be negative impacts. So those in the blue colors, they are positive impacts, and those in red color are negative impacts. So globalization, it helped in increased trade, because due to globalization, the products, they got exposed to more number of customers, and that is how trade improved. As the trade improved, the customers, they got more choices of goods. If you ask your grandfather or grandmother about the choice of models of cars they had when they were young, they will tell you about just two models. There used to be the Ambassador car, and there was a Fiat car, and one had to go for advance booking of the car by paying some token amount, and one had to wait for at least 1 year or 1.5 years to be the proud owner of the car. Okay, so this was the situation. Then nowadays, what happens, if somebody wants to buy a car, there are so many models. There must be hundreds of models available in India, and you can just buy a car of your choice off the shelf. Okay. Now, more competition, it also helped in lowering the prices. Let us once again take the example of cars. So in the 1990s, when a person from a middle class family wanted to purchase the cheapest car, that was Maruti 800, then the cost of that car was equal to at least 2 years salary of a middle class person who was working in a decent job. Okay. Nowadays, a middle class person, he can buy a car by spending around, say, 3 or 4 months of his salary. So the costs, they have come down. In rupee value, it may look up on the higher side, but in terms of income versus the price, they have come down. Okay, so and that is the reason. Now, most of the people in the middle class, they have cars. We can take another example. That is the example of refrigerators. Till 1980s or even at the beginning of 1990s, refrigerator was an item of luxury. It could be seen only in upper class homes. Okay. Nowadays, you can easily find a refrigerator even in lower middle class homes. No issue in that. So this shows the benefit of globalization. Then globalization, it has also ensured efficiency, because the local companies, in order to compete with the MNC giants, they had to improve, they were forced to improve their efficiency so that they can put better output at reasonable price. Now let us come to the negative impacts. The monopoly of MNCs, that is a huge negative impact. Many companies, the big companies, they want to maintain their monopoly. So we can take one example, that is of Facebook. What happened? WhatsApp, it was launched by new team, and once WhatsApp got a certain amount of traction, a good user base, what did Facebook do? It acquired WhatsApp in order to maintain its monopoly. The same fate happened to Instagram. Instagram was also started this unknown passage, and once Instagram gained popularity, Facebook acquired Instagram, because Facebook wants to maintain its monopoly. A monopoly is not good for customers. Globalization also results in structural unemployment. So we can take two examples. Let us take one example. There is one person who has a small tailoring shop. Okay, he specializes in stitching suits and salwar suits. But once the multinational companies came with their ready-to-wear garments, the demand for stitching, it reduced, and a time came when the tailor, he was out of his job, he had to shut his shop. So this is an example of structural unemployment. There can be another example. Let us say there is a huge factory in Gandhinagar area of Delhi where cloths are being manufactured. Now the contractor of the factory, he has taken a contract from a big garment brand, say from Levi's. Okay, and he has to meet the deadline, and he has to also ensure maximum profit for himself. So what he will do, he will force the workers or the shop floor workers, the tailors, the people who cut the cloths, or the people who stitch the buttons, to produce too many items or overproduced at lesser costs. So many people, they may not be able to bear the pressure, and they will in turn rendered jobless. Okay. Then there is a problem of unfair globalization. The WTO, it convinced its member countries to reduce trade barriers. So developing countries, they willingly reduce trade barriers in order to reap the benefits of globalization. But it was not reciprocated by the developed countries. Developed countries still give huge subsidy to their farmers, and because of that, the farm produce from India or other developing countries, they are unable to compete in the developed markets. So this is one example of unfairness of globalization. Okay. So to sum up, I talked about the meaning of globalization. Then I talked about the history of globalization. I talked about the causes of globalization. Then I talked about the impact of globalization, both negative impacts and positive impacts. That's all for this lesson. Thank you.